My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. Just recently, I was in a session with a client, and I started off the session with, "How can I help you?" And she asked me, "Why can I hate people?" And so I said, "Tell me more." She said, "Do you think it might be valuable for me to be able to have the ability to hate people?" And I said, "Tell me more." And she said, "Well, I was wondering, why am I able to not care about how I feel? And I'm willing to hurt myself, but I'm never willing to hurt anybody else. And I've been in a bunch of relationships where I would have every right to be angry and to almost hate somebody else. And I continue not to. And yet I still take the pain on myself because I'm afraid to hurt someone else." And I thought, this is a very interesting subject. Number one, I could hear and I could feel her frustration, sadness, anger. And therefore we have the words, "How can I learn to hate somebody?" In there is a very important question, and it actually does have an answer. It's quite complicated, so I think I'm going to try to answer part of that today. I think I could do multiple shows on this. Then I can still not get to the complete bottom of it. However, I think I want to try to start to answer that question because I think there are thousands, if not millions of people feel the same way at some point. So let's take it right from the beginning. The very beginning. Once upon a time, there was a baby that was born or thrown into this world. This baby was born like every other baby, naked, needy, and fully dependent on its caregivers. This baby was born with only two fears, just like every other baby. These fears are the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. Every other fear is learned from the environment. Some of these fears include the fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, the fear of being left alone, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of not being lovable. Every child is born physiologically wired with the expectation to be loved, to have connection, to have attachment, and to be safe. Any disturbance in these, plus a whole bunch of others, it will raise the child's anxiety. And if we're being honest about it, we're talking about a poor, defenseless baby or child, it does more than raise the anxiety. It raises it to a level of terror, which produces a trauma response. There's 4 major trauma responses. We have fight or flight. I think most people know what those are. We also have freeze, which is another word to say dissociate. And fawn is the 4th trauma response, also known as complying. In other words, we have to comply with someone who's more powerful than us because we have no other options. Or we could say it's where we try to be pleasing to someone or something that's more powerful than us. Now, to put in another term that maybe will help everybody to understand, let's say you go to Yellowstone National Park, you run into whatever's there, a grizzly bear, for example. Can you fight a grizzly bear? No, that option's out. You have no chance to win. How about flight? Can you run away from a grizzly bear? You're not going to outrun a grizzly bear, so that's strike 2. So those two trauma responses or options are out. You don't have those. You have freeze. You can play dead, because then you won't trigger the bear's predatory response, and maybe he'll just go by because you're not running away and he just thinks there's no threat whatsoever and there's no fun in killing you. So you might be able to use that one. The other one is fawning. How do you fawn with a bear? I don't know. Maybe if you have a bunch of food on you, what you do is you leave the food out. You let the bear have a choice that he's can take easy food, and you just try to slink away, walk away backwards or something like that. So what am I getting at here? What I'm getting at is a very small child who is in a very dangerous environment with caregivers who are not loving, not caring, not present for their child. What can the child do to mitigate their circumstances here? Can they fight? Nope, that's out. Can they run away? Nope, not at 5 years old they can't, not at 10, probably not at 15 either. So you're stuck. Now what? You can dissociate. That's what you can do. And you can also fawn. So you can comply. And what does this entail? Well, it entails if someone's dangerous around you, you do whatever they want, you say whatever they want, and you have no desires, no emotions that you want to express. You have no needs. So you make yourself small to make the other scary person get what they want. And that's the only way you can get what you want. Now, in a dangerous, neglectful, inconsistent, unsafe environment where you can't leave, you have to make sure the caregiver, or wherever you're at, the predator, the perpetrator, whatever you want to call this person or people, you have to make sure that they're less dangerous. That's number one. Or make them into a position, or put yourself in a position that you can cozy up to them so they can at least do something to help you, or at the very least, do something not to harm you. And that is the real goal. And because of this, you really won't have a sense of self at all. Now, how do you do all this? You do this by prioritizing the relationship to that caregiver, even if they're hurting you. And you do this at the expense of your own needs and your own feelings. And you do it so you can survive. It's a survival skill, not a coping skill. It's a lot harsher than that. It literally can be a survival skill for most people. Therefore, it's a good trade. You trade off who you are, everything about you, in order to just get through your days, or obviously most times to get through a whole bunch of years. What does this do overall to a person? What does it do to their identity? What does it do to their personality? What does it do to their self-esteem? What does it do to their ability to love themselves and think that they're important, or that they have a say in anything? Well, this environment creates a person who is very externally focused. In other words, you have to know what this person's going to do. You have to anticipate if they're going to be angry this day. You have to anticipate if they're going to be physically or emotionally or psychologically abusive. You have to anticipate this because you don't want it to happen. So maybe, just maybe, you can manipulate their feelings in a certain way, or do things just well enough so they don't harm you. Now, of course, the gold standard would be is to be internally focused. Who are you? What are your dreams? What do you like? What do you enjoy? What do you need out of life? But you're not going to get most of that because your environment doesn't call for that. It doesn't matter. It could be dangerous to have your own wants and needs and to verbalize them. So you become, again, extremely externally focused. You look around and you survey the environment. Another word for that would be is you become extremely hypervigilant, which correlates to complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or we could just say PTSD. What else does environment do to a person like this? Well, it makes them self-sacrificing. Again, same type of thing. You have no chance to win. You need this person. You can't fight them. You can't run away. So you sacrifice everything of yourself for this other person just so you can survive. What else does it do? It creates a person who wants interpersonal control. What does that mean? It means that you try to control this person or manipulate them in your environment. Now, I know this sounds bad, like you're doing a bad thing, but no, it's a survival skill. Again, you're trying to put yourself in a position where you don't get yelled at, where you don't get screamed at, where you don't get things thrown at you, where you don't get physically hurt, or any of these types of things. And how do you do that? By the time you're a very young kid, maybe you do all the chores in the house. Maybe you get your dad comes home from work and you're making him dinner somehow, like you're the spouse or something like that. And you're doing everything. What you're doing is you're basically becoming parentified. You're becoming a parent in a sense, is that you're caretaking a person who is an adult at the expense of your childhood and of being yourself. What else does this environment do? It creates a person who is emotionally suppressed because you're not allowed to have emotions. Now, this has a few little tricky things here because I think we can all understand. If you're dealing with somebody who's out of control, emotionally dysregulated, maybe they don't like themselves, and maybe they are on drugs or alcohol, and you're a child, I think we can all understand that if you have anger, frustration, annoyance, some complaint, I want this, I want that, that could be very dangerous for you. You know it's going to be struck down. You know you're not allowed to have feelings. You know you're not allowed to have emotions. And you don't have any needs, so it could be dangerous to even mention them. So you suppress them. So that makes sense. Not really, but in this environment, we can understand how it makes sense. The other part that doesn't seem to make sense, however, what if you have a good day at school and you come home from school and you show your caregiver that you got an A and you're smiling and you're proud and you say, I got an A, look at this. Sometimes positive emotions also trigger a caregiver. Therefore, you might learn to suppress that too. How does that work? Well, maybe you come home with an A and say, I am so smart. And then maybe the response could be, well, that's your job. You're supposed to get A's. Or, that's just one test. Let's see how the next one goes. Or, why do you think you're so smart? Or, if you think you're so smart and you want to go home tonight, so they pop the hood on their car and they pull out the distributor cap so the car doesn't start. And they say, if you're so smart, let's see how that A in social studies does you here. Do you know how to fix a car? Because if you don't, you're not going to be able to get home tonight. I just made that story up. That has no... There's no truth to that story. I just made it up out of thin air. You know, things like that just happen, right? Anyway, to sum up that part, yes, some parents could be annoyed and frustrated and angry at a child who has emotions that seem a little difficult, a little depressed, this type of thing. But they also can be annoyed at a kid who says, I'm happy that I'm smart, because it could trigger a parent who didn't go to school and think, okay, are you making fun of me? You think you're so smart. So again, that's a difficult thing for some kids. This environment also, it can create the belief that love is conditional. A child from a home like this might say, I'm only lovable if I can do things at a certain level for my partner. And they hold themselves to that. In other words, they're not good enough unless they are amazing at making somebody else's life better. The interesting thing here is that when they're thinking about themselves, they don't love themselves unless they're doing something great for somebody else or great for society. So the love that they have for themselves is extremely unconditional. But the love that they give to everybody else, starting in childhood, is completely unconditional. They could be mean, nasty, unsupportive, unloving, and yet they'll do everything possible to gain their love. Therefore, going back to the original question about hating themselves, or how can I learn to hate other people? It's a transferable skill. In a sense, they hate themselves, but they have no ability at this particular time to hate somebody else because their environment was such that they couldn't, or else they would get hurt even more. So now they're older, and now they get into a relationship where they believe, or they unconsciously brought on this thought that they're only worth something to somebody else by their ability to please them. So they become people pleasers. They take over somebody else's life to make sure that everything is okay for them. Everything is paid for them. If they have anger, depression, any type of difficult emotion, you have to fix them. Of course, at the expense of yourself. People like this also are completely, almost completely, non-judgmental of everybody else around them, including partners who hurt them. Ironically, they judge themselves harshly to the core on everything. They want to look perfect, they want to sound perfect, they want to be the smartest in the room, all these things. So yes, they become extremely judgmental for themselves, but non-judgmental for everybody else. And this makes them ripe for abuse. A person like this, or comes from this harsh environment that I've already explained, typically they have the need to be needed. What does this do? It puts them in a tough position because they tend to look for target-rich environments with people who are needy. Because if you have the need to be needed and you meet somebody who is financially secure, emotionally secure, someone who's stable and good for a relationship, and that person has stability throughout their life, and they enjoy their life, they're happy, and what they want to do is they want to share their happiness with another human being. That's what a relationship is for. But if you had the need to be needed, how do you fit in somebody's life there? There's nothing to fix. You don't have to be a savior. And so things become difficult. So you feel a lot more comfortable with someone who has flaws. And although everybody has flaws, if you have the need to be needed, you look for people with extreme flaws. So you could go right in there and try to fix it, because that's what you do. Why? Because of your environment that I spoke of,